Hey everybody, it is Mike, and I wanted to give you guys just a review, update, my thoughts on the testing I had done yesterday at Advanced Surgeons PC. By the way, great doctors, great staff there in Birmingham, Alabama. My doctor, Dr. Tuliatas, did great. His nurse Brandy did great. But I just wanted to share my experience that I had during my testing, and the end result for this testing is to see if I'm a candidate for Nissen fundoplication surgery to cure my GERD and acid reflux that I've been battling with for a long time. So the two tests that I had yesterday, and actually I guess you could kind of call it 2.5, but I'll get into that in a second. But the two tests, I'm driving, so I may have to look away from the camera. But the two tests that I had yesterday, the first one was an esophageal motility test. I think that's the official term. I'm not a doctor. But basically, the way that the first test ran was it's meant to, or the whole purpose for the first test, rather, is it's meant to measure the strength of your esophagus, the strength of your swallowing, and to see if, honestly, I guess if your esophagus can support the surgery and can support, basically being restricted after the Nissen fundoplication surgery. So the first test is the motility test, and basically the way this works, and I'll kind of walk you through step by step of what they did. First off, for this first test, which is the longest of the 2.5 that I did, and actually for none of the tests that I had yesterday, you're not sedated, you're not put to sleep, you're not put under, there's none of that. You're fully awake for all of these tests, and you have to be because of the nature of what they do. So test number 1, basically I come in, I'm nervous, and I'm nervous because I have a terrible gag reflex. I'm the kind of person that can gag themselves when they're brushing their teeth if I put my toothbrush too far in my mouth, that kind of gag. So I was a little freaked out, because I knew that this is going to be going in the back of my throat at some point, and so I'd psyched myself up, but I was trying to relax. So step 1 is, because they take a very small, and it is small, it's probably, I don't know, it's probably about the diameter of like a spaghetti noodle, maybe a little bit larger, but not much. But they basically take this catheter and they run it up one of your nostrils, whichever one is the cleanest, honestly, that they can get the best direct path. And so in order to do that, they want to numb your nostrils. And so the first thing they did was they took a few cotton swabs, like the long cotton swabs like you might have whenever you go to the doctor for the flu test. You know how they'll take that real long cotton swab and they'll stick it in your nostril and, it brings tears to your eyes? Well, they did that, but they put some type of numbing gel or medication on the actual cotton swab part of the stick, and they stuck, I think I actually had 2 in each nostril. And so they go pretty far back. In fact, she said they went further back than what you would do when you have a flu test. So she takes and puts the numbing gel on that, so it numbs your nostrils, and she puts those into your nostrils. Again, I had literally 2 sticking out of each nostril, and again, that is designed to numb your nostril because they are going to run the catheter up one side. And so that does a pretty good job, and that numbs. Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing that they did do before I think they did it before. They did it before or after, or right around the same time. They also take basically nasal spray, like Afrin nasal spray, but this Afrin has lidocaine in it. Lidocaine numbs. So they'll take and they'll do several squirts up each nostril of the lidocaine nasal spray. You are supposed to sniff it as they squirt, and that was around one of the first times that I actually began to gag before anything actually went in my throat, because the stuff tastes nasty. It's designed, they want it to run down the back of your throat. They want you to swallow it It's pretty disgusting. So that was one of the first times I gagged, just a little bit. The nurse did give me a spit pan, basically like you would vomit into. Never vomited throughout any of these tests, amazingly. But that was pretty nasty. So anyway, so they do the squirts up the nose with the lidocaine nasal spray. They have these cotton swabs, and so that happens, and they pull the cotton swabs out. And so then she takes, at some point before the actual catheter goes in your nose, and basically a syringe filled with this really thick jelly type stuff. Maybe it's the same jelly that's on the cotton swabs. I'm not sure. But she basically takes and she squirts one of those up each nostril, a syringe up each nostril of that. That stuff's pretty thick. Imagine snorting jelly. But it's, again, meant to numb your nostrils. So after all the numbing takes place, and it does a pretty good job, I got to admit, it's not meant to numb the back of your throat, but inevitably, because you're sniffing things, some of it does run down the back of your throat. So it does kind of numb the back of your throat just a little bit, not a lot. But then comes the part where she inserts the catheter up your nostril, and it goes, of course, up one nostril, and of course makes the curve down the back of your throat into your into your esophagus. And I gagged a few times during that, especially when it touches that back of your throat. It's not pleasant. It wasn't for me. Everybody said, oh, it's not going to be that bad. For me, it sucked, just to be honest with you. It was pretty bad. But, I got through it, had to really concentrate on my breathing and just taking deep breaths. And so during that part where she's running it in there and really trying to find the placement, you're sitting up. So I was sitting up on the table. I was, like she had something behind my back. She'd raised the back portion up, so where I was, but I was still sitting up. So she gets it in there, and during that process, you're given maybe a couple of swallows of water, because once it gets to the back of your throat, you kind of have to swallow it to kind of get it in place. So you're sitting there with this catheter up your nose and down your throat. You're trying to concentrate on your breathing, trying not to gag. And so once she gets it in place where she wants it, she actually tapes the catheter to your nose. At this point, and by the way, that's really not the start of the test. That's just getting the catheter in place. At this point, once she gets it where she wants it on her monitor, everything looks good. And by the way, it's not a camera. It's just got sensors all up and down the catheter. So she can't see the inside of your esophagus, not with this one. It's just sensors. But once she gets it where she needs it to be, then she laid me back on my back, a little bit elevated, but not much. And then the actual test begins. And at this point, she gives you a few instructions. And basically the goal is that they want you to swallow 10 times. Because again, it's measuring the strength of your esophagus. You're swallowing. They want to see what's going on there. So basically she took and squirted a syringe full of salt water into my cheek. I was told to take a good swallow of that. You're not supposed to swallow in between those times. You're really not supposed to talk to her. Otherwise, it can kind of throw the test off. I think out of the 10, they only had to redo one swallow. But it's like I told my wife, I can tell you exactly how many screws hold the light above the exam table in the ceiling, because I was deadlocked on that. I was trying to concentrate on my breathing. And this entire process took probably between 30 to 45 minutes. Eventually you kind of get used to the feel of it in your throat, so that I wasn't gagging throughout. But it was not fun. So once all 10 swallows of salt water happen, then the test is pretty much over. She removes the catheter, sits you back up. In my particular case, for the next couple of things that happened, I had to wait probably about 40 minutes because my doctor was actually in surgery and had to make his way from the OR over to where I was. So it took a little while. So, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I did have a little bit of a chance for my body to kind of recover and relax in between the two tests. But then again, it also kind of gave me a chance to psych myself back up. So time passes, and of course during that time some of the numbing in your nose has worn off. So anyway, comes time for the next set of tests. And the next two tests that I'm going to be getting, one is they are going to do an endoscopy, a brief endoscopy, basically just to make sure that it's not a real in-depth endoscopy like you might have had an endoscopy before, because every other endoscopy I've ever had, they've gone in through my mouth. I was fully sedated and honestly have no remembrance of the process. For this one, they use what's called a pediatric endoscope, which is much smaller. They go in through your nose rather than in your mouth. And it kind of serves dual purposes. Again, he wants to see exactly what's going on, make sure that he's placing the Bravo pH test transmitter, which I'll get to in a second, in the right place. And he also, while he's in there with the endoscopy, does take a brief biopsy. So let's back up just a little bit. So before you get ready for the next portion, they have to numb you up again. So kind of the same thing. Some squirts of the Afrin lidocaine nasal spray up the nose. A couple more squirts of the jelly. She didn't do the cotton swabs this time, but she does that. But then, man, this part was pretty bad, because these next two things going down the back of your throat are a little larger than the catheter at the first part of the test. They do want to actually numb your throat this time. So she uses this stuff. I don't know what it's called. It's like in a little yellow bottle with a long kind of like metal nozzle, I guess you would call, on it. And the best way I know to describe the taste, now that I'm thinking about it, is imagine if you squirted suntan lotion into the back of your throat. You know how that well, not suntan lotion, I'm sorry. You know the stuff like, solar cane, like you spray when you get a sunburn? Yeah, that's because it smelled like that and it kind of tasted like that a little bit. Imagine getting that squirted into the very back of your throat. Twice. Tastes disgusting, burns like crazy, like a fireball, only not the good kind. That's what I told my wife. And that's disgusting. So you're gagging on that because of the taste, and then she's got this nozzle pretty far back into your throat to make sure the back of your throat is coated. So that was another gag point. Gagged pretty good there. Didn't throw up. So now you're sitting there, your nose is numbed up again, the back of your throat is numb. It's a pretty weird feeling because my tongue felt like it was about 10 times larger than what it was. So you're good and numbed up, and now here comes the doctor in the room, and he's ready to start the test. So lies you back down, and first thing he's got to do, which this is good, is he's able to kind of do all these. Well, I'll take that back. No, let me back up. I'm sorry about that. So first thing he does, once you're all numbed up, lays you on your side, kind of facing him, and he takes the endoscope. Again, which is a pediatric endoscope. Normally most endoscopies go through your mouth. This time it goes through your nose. Puts it up your nostril, feeds it down into your esophagus, and actually for this one, he actually gets all the way to your small intestine. So this is going pretty far down. Yeah, that sucked. Gagged pretty bad. Pretty bad. Probably the worst gag was during that process. Because the thing, even though it's a pediatric endoscope, it's still pretty thick. It's at least probably like that. And, you've got to swallow it part of the way down. Your natural reaction is to bite it or to, want to spit it out. Of course, you can't do that. You have to swallow it. That sucked. But, he's got the endoscope in there. He's looking around a little bit on his monitor that he sees, because the endoscope does have a camera on it. Takes a biopsy while he's down there. Part of that involves he has to blow a little bit of air into your stomach from the endoscope. So you feel that very uncomfortable. Again, you just have to concentrate on your breathing. I was crying. Your eyes are watering. It's just like, it's like having dry heaves, but nothing came up. Terrible. I mean, I wish I could tell you it was pleasant for me. It was not. It might be different for you if you have a stronger gag reflex, but if you have a weak gag reflex, man, I don't know how anybody could get through this and not gag. It's terrible. After the endoscope part happens, then he takes the endoscope out of your nose. Now comes the part where he actually goes and places the Bravo pH transmitting device. And what this is it's basically a little bit larger than a gel cap. Imagine the end of a pencil eraser, but not the eraser itself, like the eraser and the little metal part, and even a little bit of the pencil itself. So about yay big. A transmitter doesn't have a camera on it, but a transmitter that is affixed, like it stays on the lining of your esophagus. The test, my particular test, some of them vary, is for 48 hours. But the actual transmitter will stay on your esophagus for possibly up to a week before it falls off. It's held on with magnets somehow. Don't ask me, I'm not a doctor. But the transmitter will eventually fall off. It'll pass through your system. You'll pass it in your stool. Thank God, no retrieval. But he has to place this on the lining of your esophagus. So the way they do that is, again, they go in with another tube, catheter type thing. Again, up the nose, down the back of your throat. This one, not that thick, but still thicker than the first catheter I had for the motility test. Not as thick as the endoscope, I don't believe. But he goes in, he places that, because of course he's seen where he needs to place it from the endoscopy that he just performed. Goes in, places the transmitter, and that part still gagged because it's pretty large. Just swallowing it down the back of your throat. Didn't gag as bad as I did with the endoscope, but still gagged pretty good. And goes in, places it. That part honestly goes very quickly. I think the part of him placing the transmitter took maybe 5 minutes, maybe. So that part thankfully goes quickly. He places the transmitter, he pulls that out, but we're not done yet, because guess what he's got to do? Yep, he's got to go back in again with the endoscope, the first thing, right, that we talked about that he placed, or that he was looking around. So he's got to go in, make sure that the transmitter's in the right place, just double check. And he's like, oh, this isn't going to take long, and it didn't. It was maybe a few minutes, a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. But again, there goes that thing again. Up the nose, down the back of your throat, the gagging all over again. Looks and makes sure it's good, pulls it out, you're done. The second half of the testing, I told you the motility part took about 30 to 35 minutes. All of the things that he did that I just mentioned, the endoscope and the placing of the Bravo pH transmitter, probably all together, maybe 15 minutes. So a shorter duration, But believe it or not, even though that was shorter, and they kept saying, oh, this next part, that's the easiest part. For me, it was the worst because the things going down the back of my throat were larger. The gagging was more severe. The retching, in your stomach, you're just, your body's convulsing. That part, more severe. Your throat's pretty sore. You're still numb. It wasn't pleasant. The doctor did as good as he could, and I was as good of a patient as I could and tried to concentrate on my breathing, but it was not fun. It was not fun at all. So now, for the next, until sometime tomorrow afternoon, I'm transmitting. I'm like a little radio station, I guess, right? I've got this little device somewhere in here, or in my esophagus, somewhere. And it's attached, and it's transmitting information. And it's transmitting information to this thing. Let me show you. This is the Bravo pH receiving device. So this is what records all this information. And a couple of different ways that you can wear this. You can wear this either around your neck, like a necklace. It has a Velcro strap. I took it off because I think that looks ridiculous. Or it's got a belt clip. So that's what I do. I will put it on my belt and wear it while I'm in the car. It gets in the way of the seat belt. So I actually take and clip it onto the visor. As long as it's within about 3 to 6 feet of you, you're good. If it does lose connectivity, it will give this loud, annoying beep. And all you have to do if it loses connectivity is bring it close to your chest, give it a few seconds to reset, the beeping will stop. I'm to wear this for 48 hours. It's got a button to press whenever you eat or drink anything. You press it at the beginning of that process when you eat or drink. You press it again at the end of the process to trigger that you've stopped eating or drinking. It's got another button for when you lie down. Anytime you're in a reclined, laying down state, whether it's asleep, whether it's reclining in your recliner or your chair, if you're in a reclined position, they want you to press at the beginning of that and at the end of that for any time that you're laying down. In between those two buttons, one's on each end. There's a button to indicate whenever you are having chest pain. This is not heart-related chest pain. This is acid reflux, GERD-related chest pain. Because sometimes, especially, and I had a little bit yesterday, after this procedure, you'll have a little bit of chest pain. It's more muscular from all the gas and stuff they have to kind of blow in there while they're doing the process and just them messing around. So you have a little bit of chest pain. There's a button to indicate that. There's a button to indicate actual reflux. Not heartburn, but stuff coming back up your esophagus. There's a button to indicate that. They want you to mark the beginning and ending of when that process happens with the button. Press it once to start it. When it's happening, press it again to stop. Then there's a button also for heartburn, just general heartburn, the burning in your chest. Same thing. They want you to push the button when it starts, push the button when it stops. If it keeps happening, press it throughout the duration, maybe every 10 or 15 minutes while it's occurring. This is sending information to that device, which the doctor will eventually read. According with the times where you're really not pressing anything, is constantly sending this device data. So, I have to wear that for 48 hours. I take it back, in my case, Friday morning. Today is Thursday, so sometime tomorrow morning. And then they'll collect the data and tell me what they found. I was kind of a little weirded out at first. I was thinking I was going to be able to fill the thing in there because there is a pill-sized device attached to your esophagus. I would say I don't really feel it. Amazingly enough, I really don't. I thought that it would feel like I had something stuck in my throat. It doesn't feel that way at all. Today, it's been now almost 24 hours since the test. My throat is still a little scratchy from everything they had to pass down it. I'm a little congested today. I don't know if that has anything to do with all the stuff they were squirting up my nose, but I'm a little congested. I feel okay. My throat's a little scratchy. Other than that, I'm all right. I have had a few times of heartburn. There's actually several times of heartburn where I've had to push it. Haven't had any reflux yet, but that's good. Where, I'll actually wake up in the middle of the night with stuff in the back of my throat. Haven't had that yet. Maybe I won't have it. I kind of hope I do. I know that's weird, but I kind of hope I do, so it gets an accurate test. But the bad part is while you're on this, while you have the transmitter in you, you can't take any medications. None of your prescription medications, no over-the-counter, nothing. So if you have heartburn or reflux, you got to suffer through it. Oh, and by the way, that's the same case leading up to these tests. I had to be off any medications whatsoever for up to 5 days before the beginning of any of these tests. So by the time it's all said and done, I will have gone 7, almost 8 days without any medication. It sucked. There's been a few times where it's hurt really bad, But you have to remember the end goal for all of this is to hopefully be a candidate for the Nissen fundoplication surgery, where they can go in, they remove the hiatal hernia that I have. I don't have a big one, I have a small hiatal hernia. They go in, they remove that, they fix that, they go in and they attach the fundus to the bottom of the esophagus, creating almost the impossibility for acids to get back up your esophagus. So essentially, with the surgery, almost immediately cures your acid reflux, your GERD. So that was my experience with my test yesterday. If I am a candidate for the surgery and I have the surgery, I'll try to upload a video kind of walking you through that process. But this was my experience with the esophageal motility test and the Bravo pH test. For me, not fun at all. Kind of sucked. So that's my experience. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you watching. Bye-bye.